Well, welcome back, everybody, to the final day of our Code Camp Summer of Code 2018. On Monday, we dealt with some HTML. On Tuesday, we dealt with CSS. Yesterday, we dealt with some PHP. And today, we are going to be talking both about jQuery and regular JavaScript. Now, before we even dive in, and you should be seeing the WPStudio background logo, hearing my voice, and then you can join us over on the chat room at wpstudio.com/chat so you can grab the handout. So before we even dive into what jQuery is versus what JavaScript is, I'm sure many of us who have been around the WordPress world or were taking a greater interest in it, we may have been hearing that there's this big, huge push to get everybody to use lots and lots of JavaScript and learn how to use React and learn how to use Vue.js, learn how to use regular JavaScript, and nobody's really talking about jQuery anymore. The funny thing is that jQuery is still bundled with WordPress. So WordPress ships with jQuery in its core. Yet it also ships with parts of React. It can easily ship or have some Vue.js. It has tons of JavaScript libraries in its in the admin area, in the core code of WordPress. But it is important to understand that when we're hearing people talk about learn React or learn Vue or learn JavaScript, a lot of that deals with how to edit, customize the new Gutenberg page editor, the new post editor issue that still has so many problems with it. That's a JavaScript based thing. So if you want to add components or blocks to that system, sure, you're going to need to use JavaScript to do that. But when it comes to simply working on the front end of a website, manipulating what the theme can do, this is where, regular jQuery or JavaScript is going to work perfectly fine because you don't need a massive library like React running on the front end of your website, because the front end of the website is used more for displaying content, not processing and building programs. Now, doesn't mean that you're not going to use any of those languages on the front end. It just means that's not the main purpose within the WordPress world at this present time. So, when we talk about what jQuery is, it is a library. It's a JavaScript library that contains, let's just call it pre-built functions. It has pre-built effects and ways to target parts of your website. So let's start at the beginning and really talk, and again, I'm going to go back and forth between seeing the actual HTML page here and then the code that's going on. So basically what we've got here is a generic HTML document. And I'm loading a version of jQuery, which is a tiny minified one file item, and I'm loading it from Google. So jQuery is running on this little HTML site. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working in this script so that you can see things side by side. Now, before we even get into this, what actually is jQuery? Now, JavaScript is a real-time language that operates on the end user or the browser level. For the most part, it's not going to do anything at the server level. That's where PHP is. That's where MySQL is. That's where that stuff lives as a server. Now, there are advanced uses of JavaScript that can operate on the server, but that wasn't what it was originally built for. It was built to operate within the browser so that we can have functions that will interact individually with the person visiting our website. So rather than having every single time you click on something or submit a button or hover over an anchor tag or click an element on the website, rather than having that, send a form to the server, process that, and then return with an entire page refresh that is giving the new result, JavaScript existed to operate directly within the browser. Well, how does it do that? JavaScript looks at the entire document, the document object model, the DOM, D-O-M, and it can analyze everything that's happening here. So therefore, anything that exists on the DOM, the document object model, the actual outputted HTML, we can interact with in JavaScript. So, if we look at, so with regular JavaScript, we have to code everything. We have to tell it what to do with the function. We have to tell it how to create effects and how to do all this stuff. Well, jQuery is a small language that bundles commonly used interactions to make life easier so that it's almost like a shorthand. So, if you actually look at the definition of why jQuery exists and what it does, the jQuery language traverses the structure of a site, meaning it can look at the entire, lack of a better term, source code of a web page, and then it can attach behaviors. So, if that's what jQuery can do, how do we tell jQuery, the actual language, the JavaScript library jQuery, to interact with it? That's where you will see something like this. In a script tag, in a separate JavaScript file that may be loaded on something, but you'll always see something. Now you may see, if it's not a WordPress site, you may see a $ here. The $ inside a script tag or inside a JavaScript file is basically the command that we are going to be beginning some type of jQuery instruction. If it's inside WordPress, you're almost always going to see the actual word jQuery, and then you may see a $sign in here that allows us to use just the $sign inside the brackets, inside the function that's going to be done, rather than writing jQuery all the time. Now, just as a side note, this is how WordPress eliminates JavaScript collisions. So it's a no conflict mode. If you have all sorts of plugins and themes all using just the generic jQuery instance, we're going to get different JavaScript files, programs, functions, all trying to interact with the page and then overwriting each other, and then things don't work. So the way WordPress does it is it's already coded inside WordPress that when we assign jQuery as the instruction that we are beginning jQuery, it's a way to have a no conflict mode. So once we do that and we highlight this, it reads exactly like English, where we say, hey, jQuery, look at the document. Well, that's part of what jQuery exists for, is to look at the document, and it loads the entire DOM, document object model. It loads the entire document into the memory of jQuery. So the same way HTML renders from top to bottom, PHP renders or runs the functions from top to bottom, jQuery is the same way, so that it's going to load the entire document, and then it's going to be ready to do a function. So the ready is, once you've loaded everything and you've memorized, that jQuery has memorized everything that exists, where it exists, what classes are there, what divs are there, what information is in there, we are going to be ready to do a function. So this is where we kind of our starting. jQuery exists to look at everything, and then we're going to analyze something. Now, part of the reason why you really have to be comfortable with HTML and CSS to do jQuery is one of the key components of jQuery is identifying classes, elements, HTML elements, other parts of an HTML output so that we can assign items. So that here, when we're in our function and we're ready to get started, the first one, once you have done this, once you have initiated jQuery, told it to look at the document and then be ready, the first thing we're telling it to do is go find me something. Go find me a class. Go find me an element. Go find me an ID. Go find me something in the document. So if I wanted to say, hey, jQuery, I want you to go find me something that has the CSS class core. Well, that's pretty simple because all I have to do is have my JavaScript, my jQuery initiation. And again, if I do not have a $sign in this function, it's not going to work. And I would have to do this every single time I wanted to use a $sign. But it allows us to do a shorthand by putting that in there. All right, so all I'm going to do is identify, go find me the class core. Same way we would write CSS. If this were an ID, I would say go find me the ID core. Or I can even just simply say go find me the H2 tag. So I can identify anything, any part of the HTML document. Simply, here in the first part, we're going to say, go get me or go locate this. And we can do all sorts of things. And this is also where here, I'm going to type up a different example here. You know how we can have an anchor tag with an href where we'll link off to google.com, link to Google. Okay, so we have an anchor tag there. When we are looking at an anchor tag in HTML, not every anchor tag has to have an href. Sometimes we may simply use an anchor tag name. It's an older way of doing name equals muffins. So sometimes we are simply saying that this is an anchor where we could now connect and link to this muffins. This operates the same thing as an ID, but name is there. Muffins section. Now the reason why I do this is because in jQuery, sure, I told you that we can look for the class core. If it was an ID, we can look for the HTML element. But in this whole process, we can look for attributes. So attributes that are inside HTML elements, something that we talked about in the CSS and the HTML item. So we can say, go get me or find anything that has an href link. We could even say, go find me anything that has an href link that goes to google.com. So see how we can put that in there? So we can target parts of our website that, as long as you know what the output looks like, and most of us should be able to do that by simply looking at the front end of our website, we can begin to target little areas. Now, why would we target it? Because we want to be able to either assign information there or do, let's see, what's a good thing to do? Yeah, like if we wanted to, here, let's do this. Let's say we're going to look at a target that has, instead of looking at an attribute of an href, we could look at an attribute if an anchor tag has a target that is not blank, actually, let me change that. Let me as double quotes, because you don't want to use, you want this all to be self-contained, so you don't want to turn on and off with the exact same quote, whether it's a single or double. So what we're now doing is we could then say if any link has a target that's not blank, meaning it's going to be an internal link, maybe we want to raise the font size, change the color, add a different CSS class that wraps around that link. And maybe anything, that way any image or any link that exists on the site would automatically be given that does have the target blank, meaning it's going to open up a new browser page. Maybe we are then going to assign something else, assign a different class, assign a different way, or have a different behavior that it works with. So there's some really advanced ways that we can go about targeting different parts of our website. And we can even target things like pseudo classes, why we dealt with these during the CSS class. So we could say if we had a bunch of list items, we could do a pseudo class for the first list item. We are going to, maybe we have it fade in or increase the font size, or do some type of interaction so that when we're targeting, we're saying, go find me this element, this class, this something. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go back to what we were originally going to do is we are going to go find the core CSS class. So that's what the first part is. In jQuery, the first part is simply the identifier. jQuery is able to identify anything on your HTML output because we have told it to go load the entire document into the memory and be prepared. All right? So, once we've identified what we're looking for, we now attach, and we attach it with a period, an event. An event, these are functions that are already pre-built in WordPress. Events could be everything as simple from a click to maybe a double click. Sorry, let me do it right. Double click. Maybe you have a mouse over. Again, you can always go to the jQuery website, look up events. There's a link there at the bottom of one of the handout pages. We're going to just do a click. So when we click, we're going to do a function. So this is loading the document, go find me the core, and when somebody clicks, because we have now attached an event to this class. So what we do is when we click on that, we're going to go find the paragraph tags on the website. Do we have any? We've got one here. And assign, again, this is how jQuery is working. Identify and then attach. Identify and then attach. Most of the time, this is the event part, this is the action part. So the event wraps an action. So we are identifying the paragraph tag, and whenever this event occurs, this action begins. So things like hide, show, toggle, fade, all these other things which we'll take a look at in just a moment. This is what makes jQuery really nice, is because this has all been pre-coded. The idea of what the difference is between a hide or a show or a toggle or fades, these are all pre-built, pre-custom coded. We just have to know the instruction. So once we've now done this, we now have jQuery running on this site. So let's refresh this. Great. So remember what's going to happen. jQuery has already loaded everything and is waiting on an event to occur. This event is attached to this class. That class is this h2 here. When this event occurs, the function of hiding, which is now attached to all paragraph tags that are on here, will occur. So, again, I'm clicking down here, clicking over here, clicking muffin section. When I hover over this does something, nothing happens until I click. And the moment I click the mouse, the paragraph tag just went away. And then when the next person comes to visit the site or the site is refreshed, it goes back to the original one. Why? Because we're still sitting here. So yes, you can do things like hide or show, but jQuery went to great effort to create an on-off state or on-off functions, and that operates like a toggle. So there's fade toggles, there's just regular toggles. A regular toggle simply switches back and forth between the show state and the hide state. So if we just simply say when you click on the core class, the paragraph tag will be toggled. So we refresh to make sure we're using that jQuery. Click, goes away. Click, it comes back. jQuery knows the state of everything because it has loaded the entire document into memory. So that when we toggle or we click on this, it knows which version or which state of the toggle it needs to switch to. So that's one of the easiest ways to get started. Now, just as a reminder, this target information is vitally important because when we start having larger documents and lots of stuff, I didn't save that yet. Let me do second, just so that we know that there's a difference. Third. Let me save this, refresh over here. Okay, so now if we simply wanted to target a one, like, if you click on the core, we are simply going to get rid of the first. Yeah, we could do first of type if you wanted to. Any type of pseudo class that we learned before, we can come through here and notice how it just eliminated, and it's toggling this first paragraph while not touching any of the other paragraphs. So I do that simply to point out jQuery is so wrapped up in how CSS is handled and how you can identify certain HTML elements based on the CSS pseudo classes, all this stuff. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you can really dive down and start adding interactions. Now, there's other things that's not just toggle. Maybe you have a fade toggle where you can fade in, fade out. So if I were to save this and we refresh, we would actually see something kind of fade in, fade out. It happens fairly fast. So we can turn around, and inside this fade toggle function, there's the parentheses. Inside the parentheses is where we can pass parameters. So every single one of these actions does have the ability to take on a speed. So, and it's always in like milliseconds. You can also use things like slow, fast. There's a few predefined things. All you'd have to do is go to the jQuery API, look up fade toggle. It's going to give you a lot of information. But if we set it at 5,000 milliseconds and now we refresh, we're going to see the fade occur very slowly, and then once it's all gone, boom, that goes away. And then we can fade it back in. You may want it shorter than 5,000. So there's a lot of things that we can start working with. Now, so we've got this type of fade toggle or something else like this. What we're going to do is I'm not going to use fade toggle or anything else. We're going to talk about one of the best ways for anybody who's working with WordPress and wants to add some type of an interaction. This is what you would want to really harness your skills on. And that's adding or removing classes. Because a lot of what we're going to do is we're going to pre-style things based on how we want a blog post to appear, how we want something to show up. So let's come up here, and I'm just going to add just some basic style sheets here, so that a basic style in here that we're going to call this simply a one. We're going to create just a few that will make life easy for us to do different things. So we just have 1, 2, and 3. Let's start with a very simple solution. And in this one, we're going to change the color to green. Just a simple color to green. So what happens, again, we're still targeting this H2 class core. And in this, when we click on it, we are going to target, sure, we'll keep targeting the first paragraph. Now we can add class 1. Okay, so we've added a class. Now let's watch this in real time. And in order for us to watch this in real time, I'm going to pull up the inspector, and I want you to watch right in here. So here's our H2 class. Here's our paragraph tag. Let me just make sure this is saved. Refresh. Make sure we're on our... There's our paragraph tag right here. Watch what happens. So I want you to watch where this blue is down here. Don't watch up here. Watch the blue when I click. Notice how it automatically added the class 1. And because this happens in a browser, it immediately takes that CSS. Now we can add class the same way we can remove class when something happens, or you could toggle class to turn something on or off. Again, we'll watch this. Watch this paragraph tag here. When we click it once, it adds the 1 to it. When we click it again, it removes that. Now, you will see that because it's in the browser and everything is in RAM, if someone were to be looking and watching the source code console, they're going to see that there's now an empty class. Well, that's partly because of how jQuery works. It's simply just removing the actual name of the class. And so the class still exists there, but it doesn't take any of the stylings that come with that CSS class. So where this could be extremely helpful, I'm going to pull up... one second, lorem image. I'm pulling up a lorem pixel, which is it's kind of like a image page, image website. There's a bunch of those type of things that are provide placeholder images all you have to do is assign it to a specific size. So what I'm going to do here is in this lorem pixel, and for some reason it's taken forever to load. Maybe I need to use something other than lorem pixel, because lorem pixel or maybe my browser is just, my computer is just dying here. Everything we're doing here is on the local. Okay, here we are. Got it. So what we're going to do here is in our HTML, right here under the core, I'm just going to add an image source, grab this pixum there. So when we take a look at this, we should get an image here that comes in. And the cool thing about this is if you memorize, and there's a bunch of these type of random pictures when you're developing a site, or you simply need an image, but you don't care what it is, you're just looking for the size. We can turn around and you can put the width and the height to whatever you want. So if we were to do, let's do 200 by 200. Again, I've zoomed in on this page to make life easier, but this way you'll see a 200 by 200. Okay, so now that we have targeted this image class, we've got this image, and we're going to assign it, currently have a class, we'll call this 2. There's a reason why we're adding a class here, because our class 2, let's call this one opacity 0. Let's see if it will. Okay, so it's not really there, but we will add a border 2 pixels solid black, just so that you know that there's something here. Oh, never mind. Hold on. I would want a border around this. All right, let's, rather than mess, because I would put another div around that. The div would hold the border. Here, we can do it. Div class, we'll call this our 3. Got our image, and the 3 will be a border 2 pixels solid gray. Okay, so now we'll have a border, huge border. So I might want to just make sure that my width and height, width 200 pixels, height 200 pixels. I'm trying to just match the size of this photo. All right. There's a reason why we're going through all this problem. So, okay, so we've got something here. And this is one of these kind of cool things when you're wanting to make a portfolio page or an overview or a product page for a client. There are some really cool ways that we can start saying, okay, hey, jQuery, get ready to do something because you've loaded everything. I want you to go find the div class 3. Oh, and then when someone mouse over, when somebody mouse overs that function, go find the image. Go find the the image. The image HTML element, and toggle the class 2. So now, what we've said is when anybody hovers over this div block, go find me that image and toggle the class. So that if we refresh and we mouse over, it just showed our image. Now, I'm going to make one modification there. When we begin to do this, we're gonna. Yeah, no, that's This is just a simple thing. So you can begin to make something show and hide. Again, mouse over is not the best solution because the mouse over state says, okay, you moused over, I'm going to show it. Well, I'm no longer really mousing over it, but I don't have the remove mouse. So maybe I would want something like click to view more. Click to reveal the shot. So if we actually changed it back to a click, great. So now we have something that would be click, great. Click, turn it off. So this is just a simple little thing. There's a lot more advanced ones, but I want you to get into the idea that jQuery is nothing, it's not anything huge and complex other than identifying something in the HTML document, assigning an event, and then targeting something. Now, before we go on and look at just regular JavaScript, there's one other thing to do. Because guess what? We can also target the image tag. And again, if we did this, the image tag, great. So we're targeting the image tag, assigning something to it, does exactly the same thing. But there is a shorthand in jQuery that if we have already assigned something, so we've already said, hey, we want this. See, we want to identify this element and attach this event. We don't have to identify the next thing. We can simply just say this. So this here, as the identifier, goes back to the whatever prior item has been identified. And it's just doing that. So now, rather than having to do image, we can simply assign it this way. Okay. Where life gets a little bit different is jQuery most of the time is going to live inside this type of container. The container that's loading it into the document and then running. One of the differences is that JavaScript itself does not have to load the entire document unless we tell it to. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a little button. We'll add a button right below the image that we're playing with. So I'm going to add a button tag. Example JavaScript. Okay, so take a look at this. We have a button tag that should show up right here. Great, there's example JavaScript. We can click it, nothing happens because we haven't done anything with this button. Any type of HTML element, we can take regular JavaScript, so we're not talking about jQuery anymore, and we can assign an event to the individual element, like onClick. So when somebody clicks this, and so we'd have on mouse over, on click. So the same way where jQuery says, hey, load it all, and then we're going to identify, assign an event, and then do an action. Regular JavaScript can come out of nowhere where we don't have to preload a library. JavaScript already runs on every browser unless that browser or that user has purposely turned off JavaScript. If they've turned off JavaScript, nothing you can do. So, where we can say on click, which is the same thing as assigning this click to an image tag, we can now say load the document, which is exactly what we've already done here. Load the document. get the element by ID. And in order for me to do this properly, let's assign this second one an ID, Muffin Man, just so that we've been able to target different things. So we're going to get an element by ID, where you get the element, Muffin Man. Okay, so we've got an ID there. So what are we going to do with it? This is where we can begin to change the actual styles. So the same way where we would add a class, remove a class, or something else, core JavaScript is not really working that way. It's literally rewriting CSS or rewriting information. So now we assign an action that go find the style and change the font size to 32 pixels. Oops, let me finish that. All right. So in this whole process, we're having to assign an event to this element, load the entire document, go get the element, go find the elements when this event occurs, and then rewrite the style to the font size 32 pixels. So let's make sure this works. Click. Boom. Now that's 32 pixels. Well, there's not really a toggle at this point for what we're doing. Now, some may look at that and say, well, that's awesome. That makes it so easy. I can self-contain it. But with JavaScript, we now have to, every single time you want to directly affect a certain element, we're going to have to write that in. We have to write the event. We have to load the document. We have to do all these other things that jQuery says we're going to load it once. Now we can simply start putting different elements. So if we wanted to do this exact thing and add it to the code that we were already doing, now I can say, all right, again, because I'm using jQuery, go find me the button. We're going to assign a click, a function, go find me the ID Muffin Man, and this is where we would get a little bit more difficult. Maybe we would need to simply add, let's add a 4 because we can pre-built it. Font size 32 pixels. So we could just simply now toggle class 4. So we can begin to build all of our stuff that we want to manipulate this page. And again, I'm going to just temporarily remove this, so it's just going to be a button. And I'll paste it back in. So now we can refresh the page. And when we click on the example JavaScript, it's going to add and remove. So rather than having your JavaScript inline, which a lot of regular JavaScript occurs, we can offload it into our own jQuery file that is basically loading the document once and then running all of these identifiers, events, actions. Now, there is one kind of cool thing that we can do that does make life a little bit easier with regular JavaScript. You could do this with jQuery, just not as common. So let's go back here and take this. I'm going to remove this one, or let's comment this out. Just commenting out this so you can have it when I give you the handouts, the replay. So let's go back and take a look at this. sometimes we've got our on click here. But what if, let's remove that code, we just want to write the name of a function. Do it awesome. Great. So now we can say on click, you're going to do this function. Now that function could be somewhere else in the website, or some type of script or something else where, and I'll just use it in the script tag. Function, do it awesome, document, get element by Muffin Man, style, font size, and if I didn't break everything, there. Now it operates as a remote function. So, well, jQuery says we want to keep everything modular and in and of itself. Regular JavaScript does have the ability to move beyond there. That it can operate inline, it can operate inside JavaScript functions, which now means we can do stuff with it. We can be more active in customizing. But for the most part, that's not what we're doing with WordPress websites. We are wanting to simply have the ability to interact with a client or the visitor of our website and to make things stand out a little bit more, to make things when they submit a button or press something or interact with an item or an FAQ. Why not have it slide up, slide down, fade in, fade out? It's all there. It's not hidden from search engines. It's just giving an aspect of interactivity for the end user. The final thing I just want to point out is there's a lot of misconception that JavaScript is this crazy language that we can't do anything. Why did we learn PHP when we've got all those other things? Well, there's a really cool thing about JavaScript. Let me get rid of this. Let me leave that there. JavaScript can create variables. All you have to do is assign it a var, and then we can, the variable muffin equals blueberry. So what we've now just done is in JavaScript, now we can use that variable muffin. When we did our PHP yesterday, we talked about operators and how you can add things and subtract things and do mathematical equations and do comparisons and do conditional logic statements. Now that we can put things into variables inside JavaScript, we can do the exact same thing. So all the stuff you are learning about comparing variables in PHP and combining things and adding things and working with that, you can apply all of that directly to your JavaScript understanding and your code. So when we create variables, as an example, what happens when you have a form or somebody's wanting to check out and purchase, and maybe you need to simply assign a surcharge of $15 to everything, and so we can put a surcharge so that now when we set a variable of final price to show equals where we can now start going there. Maybe you've got another variable out there that is the total cost plus surcharge. So now we have a variable price with final price. But we're starting to be able to do those type of calculations and then output that stuff. So whenever we have variables, we can integrate them into our functions, into what we would do. So this is a bit more of an introduction to JavaScript and some of the differences with jQuery. Probably the biggest one is jQuery, as its definition, likes to traverse the DOM and attach behaviors. If all you're trying to deal with is behaviors of how people operate with your sites, your clients' WordPress sites, whatever, stick with jQuery. You don't need to learn, at this time, you don't need to learn the entire React language, just that it right now is only being used to build blocks for the Gutenberg page editor. Those languages, those JavaScript libraries, are way too big to simply be sitting there to traverse the document object model and assign events. That's why when we do each year these code camps, these summer of codes, we focus, and I focus on HTML, CSS, PHP, and jQuery/JavaScript. That is your core of all WordPress sites. Everything else is built beyond that. But that's your starting point. So if you're looking at the handout, I encourage you to play around, create a little document. Try to target things. Try to use all the examples I put in there of clicking, hiding, toggling, fading, animating, adding classes, removing classes. The best way to feel comfortable with jQuery is to simply take a very basic HTML document, load your script, and start playing around with how jQuery assigns events and attaches actions. So I hope this has been helpful. We really, are just touching the surface of this, but I hope it's something that intrigues a number of you enough that you'll chase deeper into this type of code. And as a thank you for all those who maybe are not members, maybe you are a member, for attending these free sessions, I do have a special mailing going out. There's a big change coming to WPStudio. I would hope to get it done this week, but it wasn't done. There's going to be a limited time to get in on the current deal, but don't worry. For those of you attending this or current members, you will have the opportunity to get in on the new deal, and so you won't feel left out. So that email should be coming probably later today or tomorrow. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up at benjamin@wpstudio.com. For the members, you can always find me in Slack. And if you're not a member yet, definitely check it out at WPStudio.com. And the replay will be available both in the membership as well as on YouTube. So thanks, everybody, for hanging out with me. Yeah, if Slack is working, Georgia, I believe it is now back up and working. So all productivity can now fall back to the slow sludge that it used to be. So take care, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, and watch your email box for the announcement that's coming. Take care.